John F. Kennedy Airport was alive with energy as dawn broke over New York City. The large glass panels of the terminal reflected the soft golden light of the early morning, casting a serene glow over the hustle and bustle of travelers hurrying through the corridors. Among them, Samuel Cooper moved with calm, measured steps, a stark contrast to the hurried crowd around him. At 45, Samuel exuded a quiet confidence, a presence that seldom went unnoticed. His dark skin and finely chiseled features spoke of a man who had faced and overcome numerous challenges in his life. Samuel was dressed in a navy blue polo shirt that highlighted his athletic build, paired with light linen pants, practical attire for the long journey ahead. His destination was Atlanta, where his wife, Claire, and their 2 children eagerly awaited his return. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of crucial meetings in New York, where Samuel had successfully negotiated the renewal of a billion-dollar contract between his company, a global technology giant, and one of the largest airlines in the country. As the vice president of global operations, Samuel had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. He had often encountered obstacles imposed by racial prejudice, but each challenge only strengthened his resolve to succeed. Today, however, as he approached the boarding gate, his thoughts were not on the recent triumphs, but on his family, on Claire, who had always supported him through the long absences from home, and on their children Malik and Amara, whose laughter and warmth made every return sweeter. When Samuel reached the boarding gate, he handed his ticket to the flight attendant on duty, a young woman named Lisa Harrison. At 32, Lisa was known for her efficiency and professionalism, but also for her rigid demeanor. With her blonde hair tied into an impeccable bun and her blue eyes scanning the ticket, she projected an image of unwavering discipline. However, when she looked up and saw Samuel, something in her expression changed. Her usual friendliness was replaced by a cold, distant gaze. "Sir, please wait a moment," Lisa said, her tone neutral but distinctly cool. Samuel, caught off guard, nodded and stepped aside. He watched as Lisa walked over to speak with a flight supervisor, an older man who seemed to be in charge of boarding. They exchanged a few words, and although Samuel couldn't hear the conversation, he noticed the suspicious glance that Lisa cast in his direction. The supervisor, after a brief look at Samuel, appeared to dismiss whatever concern Lisa had raised and nodded for her to return to her post. "All right, sir, you can continue," Lisa said as she returned his ticket, but still without the slightest hint of a smile. Samuel, a man who had grown accustomed to noticing subtle gestures and nuances, was not oblivious to the difference in treatment. He felt the weight of the coldness in her demeanor but decided to let it go, at least for the moment. He was tired and simply wanted to get home. Once on board, Samuel made his way to the first-class cabin, where the atmosphere was one of quiet luxury. The wide, comfortable seats were scented with a faint hint of lavender, and Samuel placed his small carry-on luggage in the overhead compartment before settling into his seat. As boarding continued, he allowed himself to close his eyes for a moment, thinking about everything that lay ahead. The meeting in New York had been a success, and he was eager to share the good news with Claire. The contract he had secured would ensure stability for thousands of employees and solidify the company's position in the global market. But before he could fully relax, Samuel was interrupted by a voice he now recognized. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I'm going to need you to accompany me." Lisa's authoritative tone broke through his thoughts. Samuel opened his eyes, his calm demeanor quickly replaced by confusion. "Did something happen?" he asked, trying to understand the situation. "There appears to be an error with your ticket, sir. This seat belongs to someone else." "I need you to come with me, please," Lisa insisted, her posture rigid and her expression unyielding. Samuel felt a wave of discomfort. He knew his ticket was correct and had never encountered such an issue in all his years of traveling on business. He looked at Lisa, searching for a more reasonable explanation. "With all due respect, there is no mistake. This is my seat, and it is registered on my ticket." "I think there must be some misunderstanding," Samuel replied, maintaining his composure. But Lisa was resolute. "Sir, I insist. We need to resolve this outside of the first-class cabin. I will ask you to accompany me." The attention of the other passengers began to turn towards them. Some murmured among themselves, while others merely watched curiously. Samuel felt the weight of those gazes and the tension in the air. As a black man, he knew that any resistance on his part could be misinterpreted and potentially escalate into something much worse. It was a delicate situation, and Samuel had no desire to provoke an unnecessary confrontation. With a resigned sigh, Samuel stood up, grabbed his carry-on luggage, and followed Lisa down the aisle. They passed through the business class cabin and then entered the economy class section, where Lisa stopped next to a seat in the middle of the plane. "Please sit here. I'll check what happened and come back to talk to you," Lisa said, her tone still cold and impersonal. Samuel settled into the cramped seat, feeling the immediate discomfort of the limited space and close proximity to other passengers. As a large man, the tight quarters of economy class were far from what he was accustomed to on his frequent travels. But physical discomfort was the least of his concerns at that moment. As he sat down, Samuel noticed the curious looks of the passengers around him, some sympathetic, others merely interested in the unfolding spectacle. He took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. He knew he was being discriminated against, but he still didn't fully grasp the extent of the prejudice he was facing. As he waited, Samuel began to reflect on the situation. He had always been aware of the reality of racism, but as a successful black man, he had come to view himself as uniquely positioned to combat it. Yet here he was, sitting in a cramped economy class seat, far from the first-class cabin where he belonged, feeling helpless and demeaned. Samuel thought back to the lessons his father had taught him as a child about dealing with prejudice and racism. His father, a proud man who worked as a mechanic, had always told Samuel that he would have to be twice as good as others to be considered equal. It was a harsh but realistic lesson that Samuel had carried with him throughout his life. He had always strived to prove himself, to show that regardless of the color of his skin, he was a capable man worthy of respect. And yet, here he was, being treated with blatant disrespect by someone who knew nothing about him other than the fact that he was a black man occupying a space that, in her mind, he should not. As he sat there, Samuel decided that he would not let this incident go unnoticed. He wasn't a man who sought confrontation, but neither would he accept being disrespected in such a manner. He knew he had the power to do something about it, not just for himself, but for all the people who, like him, faced prejudice on a daily basis. After what felt like an eternity, Lisa returned, her expression unchanged. "Mr. Cooper, we checked your ticket, and there is indeed an error. However, the flight is full, and we cannot accommodate you in first class at this time. We apologize for the inconvenience and will ensure that you are adequately compensated." Her words only reinforced Samuel's conviction that this was more than just a simple mistake. It was a convenient excuse to justify behavior that she knew, deep down, was unjustified. But instead of confronting her then and there, Samuel decided he would handle the situation another way. "Okay," he replied calmly, "but I want to make sure this is documented and that I receive a formal explanation from the airline." Lisa, visibly relieved that Samuel wasn't creating any more problems, nodded. "Of course, sir. We will do this as soon as the flight lands." Samuel nodded in return, and Lisa walked away. He knew that the issue was far from resolved, but he decided to remain calm and wait until the end of the flight. The flight from New York to Atlanta continued without further incident. Samuel tried to focus on his work, reviewing some reports on his laptop, but it was difficult to concentrate with the physical and emotional discomfort he felt. He couldn't help but think about what would happen after he disembarked. He had a feeling that this was more than just an isolated incident. It could be a catalyst for bigger changes. When the plane finally landed in Atlanta, Samuel waited patiently for all the other passengers to disembark. He knew that the conversation he would have after disembarking would require privacy and concentration. He was prepared to do whatever was necessary to ensure that a situation like this did not occur again, at least not without consequences. After disembarking, Samuel made his way to baggage claim, where he encountered Lisa once more. She stood with her shoulders tense, her expression even more closed off than before. "Mr. Cooper, here is the compensation voucher for the inconvenience." "Once again, we apologize for the inconvenience," she said, extending an envelope to Samuel. Samuel accepted the envelope but did not look at the contents. He wasn't interested in a simple apology or financial compensation. For him, the issue went far beyond that. "Lisa, can I ask you a question?" he began, his tone calm but firm. She nodded, her eyes betraying a hint of nervousness. "What exactly made you think I shouldn't be sitting in first class?" Lisa was silent for a moment, surprised by the directness of the question. She tried to respond, but the words seemed to escape her. "I was just following procedures, sir. Sometimes there are errors on tickets, and we need to make sure everything is correct." Samuel shook his head, understanding but not dismissing the seriousness of the situation. "I understand that mistakes happen, but it seems to me that there was something more to this situation. You judged me before you even knew who I was, and that's not right. Lisa looked down, clearly uncomfortable. She knew he was right, but admitting it to herself, let alone to him, was a struggle. Look, Lisa, I'm not here to harm you, but I also can't just ignore what happened. My name is Samuel Cooper, and I am the vice president of the company that has the air transportation contract with the airline you work for. I was on my way to a meeting to renew that contract. Now, I need to reconsider how my company should handle situations like this because I cannot allow my employees or customers to face what I face today. The impact of Samuel's words hit Lisa like an avalanche. She stood there still, her face turning pale as she realized the gravity of the situation. His position was not just that of a dissatisfied passenger. He was someone with real power to influence the future of the airline she worked for. Samuel continued, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his experience. I know that maybe you didn't act out of malice, but the truth is that whether conscious or not, prejudice influences the way we treat people, and this cannot continue. I will report what happened, and the company will decide how to proceed. What you should do from now on is reflect on what happened today and use this experience to become a better, fairer person. Lisa was on the verge of tears. She had never imagined that something she considered routine could have such devastating consequences. She had always prided herself on being an efficient employee, but at that moment, she realized that her efficiency meant nothing if it wasn't accompanied by humanity and respect. I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper, she managed to say, her voice shaking. It wasn't my intention. I never wanted to offend you. Samuel nodded, recognizing the genuine regret in her words. I believe in second chances, Lisa, and I hope you make good use of it. I will move on with my life, but I hope that from now on, you treat all of your passengers with the respect they deserve, regardless of what they look like or what they wear. With those words, Samuel said goodbye and left the baggage claim area, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts. He knew that this would not be the last time he thought about that day, but he also knew that he had done everything in his power to plant a seed of change. When Samuel arrived home, he was greeted with warm embraces from Claire and their children, Malik and Amara. Despite what had happened, he decided to put the incident behind him for a few hours and focus on enjoying time with his family. They shared a meal, talked about their day, and laughed together, momentarily setting aside the worries of the outside world. But later that night, as Claire and the children slept, Samuel found himself unable to shake the thoughts of the day's events. He sat on the porch, looking up at the starry sky, reflecting on the impact that racism still had on his life and the lives of so many others. He thought about the struggles his ancestors had faced, the battles he himself had fought to get to where he was, and how those struggles seemed never-ending. He knew that the power he held came with responsibility. It wasn't just about what had happened to him, it was about what he could do to ensure that others didn't have to go through the same thing. He decided that in his next meeting with the airline, he would not just talk about business but also about the importance of rigorous anti-discrimination and bias training for all employees. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Lisa was also reflecting. After finishing her shift, she had gone home, but the weight of what had happened wouldn't leave her alone. She felt ashamed, guilty, and most of all, confused about how she had let things get to this point. She had always considered herself a fair person, but now she realized that something was wrong with how she judged people. Lisa spent hours replaying the incident in her mind, trying to understand where she had gone wrong and how she could improve. She knew she would have to deal with the consequences at work, but what bothered her most was the idea that she had contributed to perpetuating a cycle of prejudice that she despised. In the following days, Lisa decided to seek help to better understand her attitudes and how she could become a more aware and empathetic person. She began reading about racism, prejudice, and the history of the fight for equality. She also sought guidance from a mentor in the company, someone with more experience who could help her on her journey of self-discovery and change. Weeks passed, and Samuel returned to his work routine. He attended several meetings, including one with the airline, where he addressed the incident and suggested significant changes to their training policies. His suggestion was well received, and he felt that, at least in part, he had managed to turn a negative experience into something positive. As for Lisa, she too began to notice changes in her life. She became more aware of her attitudes and made a conscious effort to treat all passengers with empathy and respect, regardless of their appearance or status. The incident with Samuel had been a turning point in her life, making her realize the importance of seeing people for who they were, not for what they appeared to be. Both of their lives moved on, but that experience left a lasting mark on them. Samuel continued his journey, always fighting for justice and equality, not just for himself, but for everyone who still faced prejudice and discrimination. Lisa, in turn, continued to grow as a person, always striving to be better and fairer in all her actions. In the end, both Samuel and Lisa understood that change, while difficult, was necessary. And through their experiences, they each took a step toward a future where such incidents would no longer be the norm, but a distant memory of a world that had moved beyond its biases. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity for both Samuel and Lisa, each grappling with the aftermath of their encounter in different ways. Samuel, ever the strategist, knew that his influence within his company and its partnership with the airline could be a powerful tool for change. He approached his next meeting with the airline's executives not just as a business leader, but as an advocate for fairness and equality. The meeting was held in a sleek conference room high above the bustling city. The airline CEO, a sharp-suited man in his late 50s named Richard Myers, sat at the head of the table, flanked by his senior executives. Samuel, calm and composed, presented his case with the same precision and clarity that had earned him his reputation in the corporate world. "Richard, I want to talk about something that goes beyond contracts and business as usual," Samuel began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his conviction. "On my last flight from New York, I experienced something that I believe highlights a critical area of improvement within your organization." Richard leaned forward slightly, his expression curious but cautious. "Go on, Samuel. I'm listening." Samuel recounted the incident with Lisa, detailing the subtle yet profound discrimination he had faced. He spoke not with anger, but with a firm resolve to make a difference. As he spoke, he could see the varied reactions around the table. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others listened with genuine concern. "I don't believe that Lisa acted out of overt malice," Samuel continued. "But whether it's conscious or unconscious, prejudice is real, and it affects how people are treated. This isn't just about me. It's about ensuring that all passengers, regardless of their background, are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." Richard nodded slowly, absorbing Samuel's words. "I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Samuel. We have protocols in place, but clearly, there's room for improvement. What do you propose?" Samuel outlined his ideas for a comprehensive anti-discrimination and bias training program that would be mandatory for all employees, from executives to flight attendants. He also suggested creating a task force within the airline dedicated to monitoring and addressing any incidents of discrimination, ensuring that they were handled promptly and transparently. Richard listened intently, occasionally glancing at his executives, who exchanged thoughtful looks. When Samuel finished, Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression one of contemplation. "Samuel, your suggestions are not only reasonable but necessary," Richard said finally. "We'll move forward with implementing the training program and establishing the task force. I want to ensure that our airline is a place where everyone feels respected and valued." Samuel felt a sense of relief and satisfaction. It wasn't just about the personal slight he had endured, it was about making a systemic change that could benefit countless others. The meeting ended on a positive note, with the airline's executives expressing their commitment to the new initiatives. As Samuel left the conference room, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew that real change took time, but this was a significant step in the right direction. He had used his position of power not just to correct a wrong, but to push for a future where such wrongs would be less likely to occur. While Samuel was pushing for institutional change, Lisa was on a deeply personal journey of self-reflection and growth. The incident with Samuel had shaken her to the core, forcing her to confront aspects of herself that she had never questioned before. She realized that her actions had been influenced by biases she hadn't even known she possessed. Determined to change, Lisa began to educate herself on issues of racism and prejudice. She read books on the history of racial inequality in America, watched documentaries that explored the struggles of marginalized communities, and sought out conversations with people from diverse backgrounds. She wanted to understand not just the impact of her actions, but the broader context in which those actions occurred. At work, Lisa's transformation did not go unnoticed. She became more attentive, more empathetic, and more aware of the nuances of her interactions with passengers. Her colleagues, who had once viewed her as efficient but distant, began to see a new side of her, a side that was kinder, more understanding and more human. One day, as she was preparing for a flight, Lisa was approached by her supervisor, a seasoned flight attendant named Margaret. "Lisa, I've noticed a change in you lately," Margaret said, her tone warm. "You're more thoughtful in how you handle things. It's commendable." Lisa smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Margaret. I'm trying to be better, to do better. I realize now that there's more to this job than just following procedures. It's about treating people with respect and compassion." Margaret nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. We all have a lot to learn, but what's important is that you're making the effort. Keep it up." Lisa felt a sense of pride and relief. She knew she still had a long way to go, but the support from her colleagues gave her the encouragement she needed to continue on this path. As the months passed, the changes that Samuel and Lisa had initiated began to take root, not just within the airline but in their personal lives as well. The airline's new anti-discrimination training program was rolled out company-wide, with employees from all levels participating in workshops and seminars designed to challenge their biases and foster a more inclusive culture. The task force that Samuel had suggested was also established, quickly becoming a critical component of the airline's operations. Reports of discriminatory behavior were now met with swift action, and the task force worked diligently to ensure that all passengers were treated with fairness and respect. Samuel, for his part, felt a renewed sense of purpose in his work. He continued to push for greater inclusivity, not just within the airline but in all areas of his professional life. His efforts did not go unnoticed, and he was soon recognized as a leader in the fight for corporate responsibility and social justice. Lisa, too, experienced the positive effects of the changes she had made. Her interactions with passengers became more meaningful, and she found a deeper sense of fulfillment in her work. The guilt and shame that had once weighed heavily on her began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of empowerment and a commitment to continuous self-improvement. One day, while working a flight to Los Angeles, Lisa encountered a young black woman traveling with her infant son. The woman seemed anxious as she struggled to settle into her seat, juggling her baby and her belongings. Lisa approached her with a warm smile. "Let me help you with that," she offered, gently taking the woman's bag and placing it in the overhead compartment. "Thank you so much," the woman replied, relief evident in her voice. "It's my first time flying with him, and I'm a little nervous." Lisa knelt down to be at eye level with the woman. "I understand. Don't worry, we're here to help you. If you need anything at all during the flight, just let me know." The woman smiled back, her tension easing. "You're very kind. I really appreciate it." As Lisa returned to her duties, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It was a small gesture, but it represented a significant shift in how she approached her work. She no longer saw passengers as mere numbers or tasks to be managed. She saw them as individuals, each with their own stories, struggles, and joys. Several months after the incident, Samuel received an unexpected message from Lisa. She had reached out to him through a mutual acquaintance at the airline, asking if they could meet. Curious, and perhaps a little surprised, Samuel agreed. They met at a quiet cafe in downtown Atlanta, a neutral ground where they could talk openly. Lisa arrived first, her nerves a jumble of anticipation and anxiety. She had thought long and hard about this meeting, about what she wanted to say, and more importantly, about what she wanted to learn. When Samuel walked in, Lisa stood to greet him. He smiled warmly, extending his hand. "Lisa, it's good to see you," Samuel said, his tone sincere. "You too, Mr. Cooper." "Samuel," Lisa replied, correcting herself with a nervous laugh. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." They sat down, and after a brief exchange of pleasantries, Lisa took a deep breath and began. "I wanted to thank you, Samuel, for what you said to me that day at the airport. It was hard to hear, but it was exactly what I needed. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions and educating myself about the issues you raised. I realize now how much I had to learn, and I wanted you to know that I've been working hard to be better." Samuel listened carefully, nodding as Lisa spoke. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the determination to grow and change. "I'm glad to hear that, Lisa," Samuel replied. "It takes courage to confront our own biases and to make a conscious effort to change. I'm proud of the steps you've taken." Lisa smiled, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over her. "I also wanted to ask you if you have any advice for me on how I can continue to improve, both personally and professionally. I don't want to stop here, I want to keep growing." Samuel appreciated the humility in her request. He thought for a moment before responding. "The fact that you're willing to ask for advice is a sign that you're on the right path. My advice would be to keep listening and learning. Engage with people who have different perspectives from your own, and don't be afraid to challenge your assumptions. And most importantly, remember that change is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, and there's always room to grow. Lisa nodded, absorbing his words. Thank you, Samuel. I promise to keep working on this. They talked for a while longer, discussing their experiences and their hopes for the future. By the time they parted ways, both Samuel and Lisa felt a sense of closure, as well as a renewed sense of purpose. The years that followed were marked by significant progress for both Samuel and Lisa. The airline's new policies led to a noticeable improvement in employee behavior and customer satisfaction. The training programs and the task force became models for other companies in the industry, leading to broader changes across the sector. Samuel continued to be a vocal advocate for equality and inclusivity, both within his company and beyond. His influence grew, and he was frequently invited to speak at conferences and events, where he shared his experiences and insights on creating more equitable workplaces. Lisa, too, flourished in her career. She became known not just for her efficiency, but for her empathy and fairness. Her colleagues respected her for her commitment to treating all passengers with dignity, and she quickly rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a supervisor herself. In her new role, she made it a priority to mentor younger flight attendants, sharing the lessons she had learned and encouraging them to approach their work with the same care and consideration that she had come to embrace. The incident that had initially been a source of pain and discomfort for both Samuel and Lisa had, over time, become a catalyst for positive change. It had brought them to a deeper understanding of themselves and each other, and had set them on paths of growth that would have lasting impacts on their lives and the lives of those around them. As they moved forward, Samuel and Lisa carried with them the knowledge that change is possible, and that even the smallest actions can have far-reaching consequences. They had both learned that it was not enough to simply recognize the existence of prejudice. It was essential to actively work against it, to challenge it wherever it appeared, and to strive always for a world where everyone is treated with the respect and fairness they deserve. In the end, they both understood that the journey toward justice and equality is ongoing, and that it requires the effort of everyone, at every level, to make real and lasting progress. And with that understanding, they continued to walk their paths, committed to making the world a better place, one step at a time.